the last video, we created the collision handler for our ship. In this video, we'll be designing and configuring the asteroids for our game. First, we need to create the images for our asteroid sprite. Here, I'll be using Photoshop. First, find a nice base color to work with, and draw an outline for the asteroid, coloring in the inside with the same color. Here, I'm just using the brush tool. If you're following along in Photoshop, make sure the smoothing variable for your brush is pretty low. Here, mine is 10%, but 0% would also be acceptable. This makes sure that our colors don't run outside the line of our selection. Let's add some darker spots to the asteroid to create some craters. Create a new layer and draw some blobs on the asteroid. Next, select an even darker color for the crater shadows. This will help us establish some depth. Select one of the craters by using the selection tool or the lasso tool and draw around the crater. Refine the selection to our object by using the move tool, whose shortcut is V on the keyboard. Then, using the brush tool, draw around the outer edge of the crater to add the shadow. Repeat this process with each crater. Make sure all the shadows are on the same side of the crater, otherwise the lighting will look kind of confusing. Crop the image so that it fits the asteroid nicely, and then export the image as a PNG. Next, repeat the process for a few smaller asteroids. We will spawn these smaller asteroids when our large asteroid breaks apart. After we've created the smaller asteroids, let's bring in the PNGs to our Unity project. Let's create a new game object by right-clicking in the hierarchy and selecting Create Empty. Name this game object Asteroid Large. Then let's add a sprite as a child of this game object by right-clicking in the hierarchy, navigating to 2D object, and selecting Sprite. Then drag this sprite onto the asteroid, making it a child of that game object. Next, let's add the large sprite by dragging the image into the sprite variable component in the inspector. Resize the asteroid to fit nicely in the scene, and make sure its position is set to 0. And let's set up the Asteroid script. Create a new script by right-clicking in the project panel, navigating to Create, and selecting C# Script. Name this script Asteroid. Then rename the sprite game object to Mesh. Then attach the script to the Asteroid game object. Let's add a Circle 2D collider along with a Rigid Body 2D component, setting the gravity scale on the rigid body to 0. Let's open the Asteroid script, which now I've just realized is missing an E. Oh well. Let's add a public array of game objects to our asteroid, which will manage the smaller asteroids when it breaks apart, and a private rigid body component. Let's initialize the rigid body in the awake function, setting it equal to the rigid body 2D component that's on this game object. Next, let's randomly move our asteroid in the game using the add force function inherited from the rigid body component. Then we can use the update function to randomly rotate the asteroid, giving it the appearance of drifting through space. Now, to set up the collision handler, we can use the onTriggerEnter2D function and destroy the object as soon as something collides with it. We also want to spawn the smaller asteroids before destroying this game object, so I'll create a new private void function called breakApart. I'll write a for each loop that iterates through the array of asteroids and spawns each one at the current location of the large asteroid using the instantiate function. Lastly, be sure to call the breakApart function in the collision handler before destroying the game object. Now, to set up the smaller asteroids, create an empty game object by right-clicking in the hierarchy and selecting Create Empty. Then add the sprite to this game object by right-clicking on the empty game object, navigating to 2D Object, and selecting Sprite. Make sure to add the smaller asteroid PNG to the sprite variable in the sprite renderer component. Then resize the sprite to fit nicely in the scene. Add a rigid body 2D component, setting the gravity scale to 0, along with the Asteroid script. Then add the small asteroid game object to the large asteroids game object array. Drag the smaller asteroid into the project panel, making it a prefab, and delete it from the hierarchy. Now let's test the game. As you can see, the large asteroid is moving way too fast. Fortunately, because we used rigid body components to manage our physics, this can be easily corrected by increasing the mass variable in the rigid body component. Let's also change the mass for the smaller asteroid and create the remaining two. After you've set up the remaining smaller asteroids, add them to the large asteroid array and test the game. Lastly, I'll make a prefab and sprite folder to organize our project panel. To create a folder, right-click in the project panel, navigating to Create, and select Folder. In the next video, I'll be setting up the collision handler for our asteroids.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the content we release daily. Thanks for watching.